Yields back. For what purposes does Mr. Gaetz seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're not calling parents terrorists. We're just saying that people who happen to show up at school board meetings with a vested interest in what the school board does are going to have involvement from the counterterrorism division of the FBI and a threat label. That would sort of be like me saying, I'm not calling judiciary Democrats apologists for a lying attorney general. I'm simply saying that those who attend judiciary meetings on that side of the aisle deserve an apologist tag. It's absurd. Folks show up at school board meetings not just because they care about their kids, but because they care about the outcomes in our school system and in our country. And when they do so, we do not need the federal government tagging parents with that designation. If there's a threat to violence in communities, there's no attestation or evidence that law enforcement in local communities can't deal with that. This isn't a threat, this is threat construction. You have the federal government in our country so worried about an uprising of good regular folks who don't want to see this wokeness and this poison driven into the next generation. They're so worried about that they've literally involved the counterterrorism division at the highest levels of federal law enforcement. And here's why. They have legislation that they can't run on. I'm going to speak to the gentleman from California's legislation in a moment, but they have a Build Back Better Act that isn't popular. They have an infrastructure bill that gave no enhanced confidence from the public in their ability to govern. And so the whole deal that you're hearing from Democrats in Congress is that Republicans are scary. Parents, folks who show up at school board meetings, they could potentially harm you. And the only thing here that's going to protect you, America, is a Justice Department and an FBI that is choosing to play politics. The good news is the American people aren't falling for it. The bad news is we don't know how many. That's my question. How many people who showed up to school board meetings, who sent an email, who made a phone call, who expressed their First Amendment rights, how many of those people right now are under any tag or designation or supervision from the counterterrorism divisions of the highest levels of federal law enforcement? Is it like 5 or 6 thousand? Who knows? And who's next? That's the other question. My colleagues, Mr. Gohmert from Texas and Ms. Green from Georgia, went recently and observed the conditions in the D.C. jail, circumstances where people are being deprived access to medical care, access to counsel. I know many of us on this committee care deeply about prison reform. We work together on bipartisan legislation to try to ensure that no American would face grieved conditions that we would be embarrassed about in the world. But now we are seeing that system used for political advantage, and that's what we should certainly be against. Now, on the legislation before us, my colleague from California says that what we really need to do is relieve the added burden that cold cases have as they languish, but I do wonder whether or not a bill that requires and demands, invests in people the ability to ignite re-reviews of evidence, if that doesn't enhance that burden rather than relieve that burden. So I know he brings it in sincerity, but I can't say there's been equal sincerity brought to the threat construction around school board parents and really the pattern recognition that we see, right? I mean, we see in these Durham indictments that are coming out now that the proposition from Durham is the FBI was lied to. They were victims of these Russians that were telling lies about President Trump, when we all know that the FBI went and seeded those lies to justify action that they wanted to take that they wouldn't have otherwise been willing to take. And it's the exact same pattern. Are they teaching this stuff at the FBI Academy? It's the exact same deal with the school board parents or anyone who shows up at a school board meeting. They wanted the authority to issue these threat tags, to monitor people whose political organization posed a threat to them. And so they went and nurtured and induced this letter out of the National School Boards Association, and then lo and behold, you see political patronage jobs being given out as a consequence. Everyone knows what's going on here. The House Judiciary Committee should be investigating these things, and what we'll find in that investigation is when the FBI and the Department of Justice want to go after people, want to go after Trump, want to go after political opponents, want to go after organizing parents and communities, they seed a lie. and they get that lie retold, and then they use it to target people. What a shame. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back for